be screwed. Feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Issei, Rias Enter Beelzebub. Special note, this fanfic is written in the masterpiece of WDO 345 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Furuichi felt his body shiver as he stared at the Ishiyama school again. The tall dirty building and the broken off sections of walls and windows. For most of the students there, it was home, and maybe a safe haven. But for Furuichi it was a place where dumb apes and animals scurry about. This realization, dawned after only a year in the place already, was only spurred on when just shy of 2 seconds from entering the place, a gang fight had already occurred right outside the main building. The white-haired teen couldn't help but cry inside as he watched the two big apes break bones and smash faces in. He would have cried, honestly, if he hadn't seen the Red Tails, the appealing young women gang of Ishiyama, strolling into the school. "Umori," he cried happily as he immediately moved towards her. The young red-headed woman, with a rocking body that Furuichi couldn't help but comment on, turned to him and sweat dropped. He could see her eyes narrow tightly as she sped up her gait. Worthy of the name Crepichi, Furuichi quickly rushed behind her, hands behind him at the speed he walked in. But the red-headed woman was faster, and he couldn't keep up entirely. "Oh, Tanemura," Furuichi greeted as he stepped up to the side of Chiaki Tanemura, another member of the Red Tails Femme Fatale. The white-haired, hot-blooded teenage boy was rather disappointed though when he noticed that while her stature was short, her appealing milky white legs were covered up due to the winter cold. DMN weather seasons. Chiaki turned to him, her eyes as blank as they always have been, and greeted him. "Trash." Furuichi felt a sharp stab in his heart, his smile faltering as he tried to maintain his pleasant expression. But inside his Tsukomi screamed, "You're still going on about that. What Tanemura? Surely you don't still see me like that, right? Right? I'm Oga's hash too. Does this position really give me no prestige?" Tanemura stared at him, then slapped a hand to her lips to feign laughter. Furuichi's eyes bulged. "What is that? What is with that reaction? Is that really my reputation even now?" Tanemura didn't reply and instead turned back to Nin and zoomed past him in a pace faster than Furuichi could keep up with. The young man with slight perversion, because really he still at least understood boundaries to a certain extent, watched the Red Tails disappear past them with their faces blank and sweat rolling off their shoulders. "Oh well," he muttered to himself. If he wasn't mistaken, Oga had already arrived to school earlier, and there was no doubt that Hilda was somewhere out and about watching him. The thought of appealing Hilda somewhere here made him get a spring in his step, even if his fantasies were vastly different from real life. He stepped 2 steps forward, then felt 2 familiar burly arms encircle him. At first he wondered if he should bring out his demonic tissues, since ever since the fight with Satan the effects of the tissues diminished somewhat with the contracts he signed, but thought better of it. Jabberwock was still pretty pissed at him the first time he summoned him accidentally to smack Alendelian away. "What is this?" he yelled instinctively before he felt the familiar in that word, sensation of entering Alendelian DMN that even more. "Don't worry, Takeuki Dono, you can rest easy that I would do nothing to you without your permission," Alendelian whispered into his ear. "Don't whisper something like that to my ear, you old man," Furuichi yelled in desperation as he struggled against the old man's tight grip. His vision was ensnared in a bright blinding light before he was encompassed by the sides of the old man. It was a brief moment later, much like the slow gait of a snack, before he was tossed onto the ground of where he had visited a few odd months ago. "Huh? I'm back at the castle?" Furuichi exclaimed as he stared at the large gate. Alendelian stood stoically next to him, hands to his side as he bowed in respect to he woman standing serenely at the front of the gate. "Furuichi Dono, thank you for accepting our call so soon." Lamia, the mother of Lamia and a member of the 84th Pillar Division, bowed her head in greeting to Furuichi. Whatever qualms Furuichi had in the matter of Alandelian's sudden appearance was washed away at the sight of the appealing Lamia standing before him. Thought a part of him was rather obstinate at ogling the mother of Lamia. The greater whole of him had overridden the small voice for the longing to appreciate the body of a young gorgeous woman. "Oh, Furuichi Dono, you are still learning, I see. It's a shame, Lamia's coat makes it difficult for me to see the object of my own longing." Dr. Forcas, the self-proclaimed man who loves but more than tips, walked up to greet Furuichi. Both of them grasped hands in brotherly camaraderie, their perversion having long since developed their friendship as men of longing. If anything else, Furuichi was glad that there was somebody else that shared in his thoughts, and wouldn't give him the nickname of Creepichi. "Oh, Dr. Forcas, and Lamia-san. I had no idea you were the ones who called for me. I thought it was Alandelian disturbing me again," Furuichi said as he scratched the back of his hat in embarrassment. "HMPH, how rude, Takayuki Dono, I would never disturb you in such a way," Alandelian muttered as he glanced away. "Like hell you do," Furuichi's Tsukomi side yelled. "And what is that reaction? Are you a tsundere from a shounen manga? Die. Seriously die, you old man." In reaction, Alandelian grabbed his face with his hands and blushed. "Please stop, Takayuki Dono. I alone truly understand your feelings. Just die already." Before any more could be said, Furuichi felt a rough tug at his collar, and he was unceremoniously dragged away by Dr. Forcas. "Sorry, kid, but your comic relief isn't really needed right now. Lamia has already continued on into the castle without us." Furuichi's sweat dropped as he was unable to stand up to his feet and had to endure being hastily dragged up the stairs, where the lesser-ranked pillar soldiers saluted at every turn. Furuichi knew that ever since he had accepted a contract with all of the pillar generals and barons that he had been elevated to a rank of prestige among the lesser soldiers. Even in school he had already been given the title the Man with 100 Faces, and he had even once almost destroyed Ishiyama in an Oga-like way due to Jabberwock. "Good afternoon, Lieutenant," the soldiers greeted. Furuichi's sweat dropped at their formal respect. "Why are they calling me Lieutenant?" Furuichi asked uncomfortably, though he admitted it felt nice having a few mob characters for himself as well. "I apologize," Lamia said as she slowed down her pace. "Considering your contract with the top echelons of the pillar squads, it was considered to formally induct you into the unit so as to stave off any confusion." "Huh? I was inducted into the pillars? Is that okay? I'm a human. How is a human so nonchalantly accepted into a demon army?" "It's quite all right," Lamia said while smiling patiently. "You already have a contract with our current general, so in no ways are you a regular human. As such, it was deemed fit to give you the rank of lieutenant, so that it wouldn't seem weird to see you among the barons and generals, especially when they call upon you to bear their strength in the human world. Still, this is an unexpected circumstance, especially for a high school student." "It's fine," a new voice interrupted. "As a tactician, even you must understand that this would provide the best possible situation for you among the pillars." "Hekadoth?" Furuichi yelled in greeting. It was generally accepted that Hekadoth was among the most frequently called pillar to Furuichi's side, and the one that was most at use within Furuichi's body. His power fit most with Furuichi, who didn't favor the destructive force of Jabberwock or the dancing agility of Agile, which could be considered cowardly among those of Ishiyama. "Can you stop shouting, Lieutenant?" Hekadoth muttered, smirking in slight bemusement when he noticed Furuichi looking uncomfortable being called by rank. "Be glad, we could have made you a lowly private that listens to our every beck and call." Furuichi started to sweat at the vicious smile on Hekadoth's face. "Hee, of course. I am ever grateful. However, the situation is rather drastic. We wouldn't have called you unless the situation was indeed dire enough to demand the call," Hekadoth said seriously as he went to step next to Lamia. "What?" "All will be explained soon, Furuichi Dono, but please for now exercise patience," Lamia suggested. He clamped his mouth shut and nodded, rising to his feet when Dr. Focus allowed him to. Looking at Lamia, Furuichi was able to understand the situation well, considering the frown on the familiar face, the mother of the young girl that frequented Oga's house. "Speaking of her, where is Lamia anyway?" Furuichi asked. "She's currently asleep. Yesterday was a tiring day for us, especially with how the situation has become," Dr. Forcas replied cryptically. It took a while, but eventually Furuichi was led to the topmost section of the castle, where the highest echelons of the 84th Pillar Squad were waiting. The young man couldn't help but feel the cold tingle of danger running down his back at being in the presence of so many dangerous existences around him. "Oh, it's good to see you again, boy. Or rather, should we call you Lieutenant now?" Behemoth asked as he spared a wide smile to Furuichi. "Oh, Behemoth-san," Furuichi muttered a terrified greeting. "It's a pleasure to see you again." The old man chuckled and gestured to a seat on the round table that dominated the center of the room. "Please seat, boy, we have much to discuss," Behemoth said, and Furuichi quickly complied, staring uneasily at Lamia and Hekadoth, who had taken seats far down the aisle. "Now I'm sure you are wondering why we have asked of you to come here," Behemoth said in his gravelly old voice. "Yay," Furuichi agreed. "I would imagine Oga would be better suited here." He immediately regretted mentioning that name as all of the assembled pillars glared balefully at the space in front of them. Even Jabberwock's eyes darkened. Though they had allowed Oga to drain them of power to defeat Satan, that didn't mean they had forgotten their past grievances with the young boy. The only one not all too affected was Lamia, Dr. Focus, an Agiel who was twirling her hair idly. While Oga would have been a likely candidate, "I'm afraid our situation requires a more deft touch," Behemoth replied easily, since he didn't really have that great of a problem with the boy. "Rather, our Lord Beelzebub has a plan for him and wishes us not to disturb him. Besides, you are more than enough, and with your king's crest, your battle potential at your base is higher than before." "Oh, is that so?" Furuichi said. Or rather, he didn't like the sound of that. "Furuichi, just how exactly do you perceive the situation in hell?" Hekadoth asked seriously, watching him carefully. "Eh?" Furuichi was surprised at the sudden question. "What do you mean? Hell is ruled by the current Beelzebub, isn't it?" Behemoth nodded as he stapled his fingers together. "Yes, but there seems to be a discrepancy between what you know and what the devils around you have mentioned. Currently, there are 4 great Satans that rule over hell. Objectively, you can consider them our standing government." Furuichi's eyes bulged. 4? "Yes," Lamia nodded her head. "Beelzebub, Lucifer, Asmodeus, and Leviathan. While our Lord Beelzebub has indeed united this section of hell, his territory is only a small portion of hell." "Wait, Lucifer? But we defeated her," Furuichi exclaimed. Hekadoth shook his head. "That Lucifer is a descendant of the old Mao. Rather, it is easier for us to say that in the past there was a civil war between the current Maos and the old Maos, thus resulting in the formation of hell today." "Are you keeping up with me, tactician?" Hekadoth asked. Slightly deterred by the onslaught of information that he didn't know about, Furuichi nodded shakily. "Our current Beelzebub, Ajika Beelzebub of the House of Asteroth, is considered one of the strongest in hell, equal to that of the current Lucifer. While they are both quite strong, Lord Beelzebub was smarter and was able to create most of the formulas that govern Devil Society today," Behemoth stated. At Furuichi's uncomprehending gaze, Behemoth elaborated. "With the loss of devils in the Civil War, our Lord Beelzebub devised the evil chess piece system. It is the process of reincarnating a human into a devil through the use of a chess piece that grants certain attributes to the reincarnated devil. You could compare it to the king system that devil contractors use. Unlike devil contractors, though, the abilities of the reincarnated devils do not require a stream of power from the king." "Wait," Furuichi interrupted, "you can reincarnate humans into devils." "Yes, though only those we have deemed strong. However, only the high devils are able to use the evil piece system fully," Behemoth clarified. "I don't see how this affects me," Furuichi said. "Or rather, wasn't the current Beelzebub supposed to be a lazy demon that goes with the flow? What's with this out-of-the-blue development?" Furuichi shut his mouth quickly, hoping he hadn't insulted anybody. They all seemed too engrossed in their thoughts to notice. "Recently, there has been movement outside of hell, in Japan specifically, by the fallen angels. We are not sure exactly of what is actually occurring, but we are wary to find out what. Currently, our Lord Beelzebub has ordered us not to disturb, but as members of the 84th Pillar Squad, we have also gotten whiff of the old Mao faction on the move." "Again, I don't see how this affects me. I understand the need for exposition, but you're boring our readers," Furuichi said. "For starters," Jabberwock began, shocking Furuichi, "while the 84th Pillar Squad are incapable of doing anything here in hell, On Earth, it gives us certain leeway, especially with our newly inducted lieutenant. Furuichi felt the beads of sweat roll off his forehead. But I'm a high school student, Furuichi countered desperately. He did not want to be included in whatever turf war was going on in hell. That will be handled. You will be transferred to a school within the vicinity of the disturbance, Behemoth stated. What makes you think I'll go? Furuichi yelled. At that time Hekadoth sucked in a breath. All of the Pillar Squad stared at him, as they too had wondered about the answer to that question. Hekadoth was the one with the longest history with the lieutenant, and while the others had been called by him various times throughout the year, Hekadoth was the only one to have been called as often. Not to mention Angeal would always drag him to the Pillar's annual lunch party and sit him on their table next to Hekadoth. After a moment Hekadoth stood up and stood behind Furuichi, his voice lowered to a whisper. The school has a population dominated by girls with C-cup melons and shapely legs, he intoned, hands gripping Furuichi's shoulders. Oh ooh, he snapped. Why didn't you say so? Let me go. Let me go. All at once the Pillar Generals stared at Furuichi with disbelieving looks. What in but? Hey, I'm a healthy teenage boy, he cried, having heard their thoughts. Oh, a school 90% made up of women. What is this? When has God been so just? I will pray. I swear I'll pray forever for such a great blessing. Furuichi muttered happily as he sat quietly in the back of a cover. Hekadoth was driving and Angeal was sitting in the passenger seat while Lamia was sitting next to him. But I wonder why you had to tag along. Lamia glanced at him with a HMPH sound as she crossed her arms. It's not like I wanted to. Dr. Forcas was worried how you would fare in the current theater of war, so he asked me to make sure you were in pristine health. That made Furuichi slightly uneasy, thinking that there was a chance he might be banged up enough to warrant having a doctor on hand permanently. And what was this theater of war? It's a school, not a war zone. Plus, as the daughter of the second in command, it was to be expected I would tag along. Well, sure, I guess. What about the two of you? I thought the whole reason I was going in the first place was because I could call on you guys with the tissues, Furuichi asked the two in the front. We'll be playing liaison between you and the devils in the school. You should take care. The sisters of the current Lucifer and Leviathan are currently enrolled in that school, alongside several other people aware of the supernatural world such as beast tamers, Hekadoth explained as he handed Furuichi a photo of the two Citri and Gremory heirs. Holy SHT, those are huge knockers, Furuichi yelped as he stared at the bust of the red-headed Gremory girl. Before he could say more, however, he felt a powerful punch smash into his gut, and the wind leaving his body alongside his soul. Geez, is that all you think about? Lamia complained as she turned away from the disgusting boy. Angeal giggled quietly into her hand as Hekadoth smirked at the young lieutenant. I agree, Hekadoth stated. She has an impressive rack. Oh, Heka-chan can be Ikai too. Angeal laughed even harder when Hekadoth frowned at the comment. I'm just saying, he muttered. Regardless, Furuichi said, slightly breathless from the punch, why am I dressed in the 84th Pillar Squad's uniform? He was in fact dressed in the all-military uniform, just without the coat. As a lieutenant, Furuichi had learned that while he had power over the lower-ranked members of the Pillars, the Pillar Barons and Generals generally outranked him. You're going in the guise of an exchange student from a military school. We thought, since you would have to get used to wearing the uniform eventually in the future, might as well get you doing it now, right? Angeal said. Furuichi's sweat dropped at such nonchalant thinking. Listen here, Furuichi. These are important figures in hell, so you better go in with utmost respect. They are probably busy and wouldn't have time to deal with your lecherous ways. Lecherous ways, Furuichi felt like crying at that. Yay, he muttered. If anything, Oga was the only person in his life who could be said to be an important figure, and if they were anything like his best friend, then he would actually really cry. All right, we're here, Hekadoth said as he stared at the school building. Furuichi, however, wasn't paying attention to that. Instead, he was staring unashamed at the scores of appealing young schoolgirls that filled the school grounds. Tennis teams, he cried happily as he stared at the school's tennis team that were practicing on their court. Appealing girls, Furuichi thought with utter joy in his heart, ignoring Lamia who was stomping her foot into his ankle. Ah, I feel so refreshed, Tilda, he said happily. Angeal giggled at his reaction even as Hekadoth parked the car inside the school building. Still, I can't believe Mom and Dad agreed to have me here. Though we ended up bringing Hanoko with us too, he said, thinking back on his sister. She wanted to spruce up their new apartment first before going to school, of which she was enrolled alongside her brother, but as a first year as opposed to Furuichi's second year. It was pretty easy. They were pretty inclined to get you out of Ishiyama as quickly as possible, Hekadoth agreed. The only problem was what you said to Oga. What did you say to him? Told him I was going to a Hentai convention. He let go pretty quickly and Hilda called me a Dichi before I left, Furuichi muttered. It was about the only thing he could say without them getting suspicious of him. But having Hilda call him a Dichi unnecessarily hurt him deep inside, and oh, so many short skirts are in his view. Is that enough? Hekadoth muttered as he stared at the perfectly reasonable way Furuichi said that. More than enough, actually, Lamia agreed. Hekadoth ignored the implications of such words and instead hopped out of the car with Agil in tow. Both Lamia and Furuichi followed in suit, the male of the two adjusting the new foreign attire he was wearing. In Ishiyama, he didn't really need to wear the uniform with any semblance of strictness, but with the military attire he realized he was forced to or look utterly out of place in them. At least he didn't have the coat, he thought. I wonder if you're going to be a main or just another comic relief, Lamia muttered as she walked alongside him. Furuichi wondered why she was there, as she wasn't old enough to actually be enrolled into Cuo Academy, and he'd rather not spend too much time with her, lest he be labeled as Creepichi here as well. It'd be rather strange to have a crossover with a mob character now, wouldn't it? Nor would it be entertaining, Furuichi laughed. Nothing else of much importance was said as Furuichi entered school ground, and he tried his best not to fumble with all of the kids staring at him. Of course, the sight of him would be rather surprising to the average student, who were probably not used to see three obviously militantly dressed people enter their school grounds. At least Agil was covering up her bikini with her coat. Heaven knows the misunderstandings that would bring. Hey look, are they new transfers? Eh? What's with the military uniforms? Rather than that, why do they have gills? Must be a foreigner thing. Furuichi's sweat dropped at that last bit. Hekadoth stopped in the middle of the hallway and handed Furuichi a piece of paper. This is your class. You may go and do whatever you wish. Me and Agil will speak with those in charge of this territory. I'll go set up at your apartment, Lamia said. Don't do anything weird while I'm gone. Furuichi nodded his head and bade goodbye to them before heading to his assigned classroom. While he walked, hundreds of thoughts filled his mind, like how the new students would react to him. Furthermore, what was with this weird setup of him being in a military school? Is that cool? Was there even a military school with uniforms like these? Sighing to himself, he rapped the door on his newest classroom. The teacher inside glanced at him for a moment before he understood that he was likely the newest student. Walking into the classroom, Furuichi waited for the teacher to introduce him. Pay attention, everyone. We have here a new student transferring over from a military school in Macau. It must be difficult for him, so please do your best to get along with him. Furuichi's sweat dropped and wondered how he was going to explain this to Hanoka. Yes, I'm Takayuki Furuichi. It is nice to meet you. Furuichi tried to bow his head, but his uniform immediately forced him to snap a salute. Oh right, Agil had told him that his uniform was imbued with certain properties to make him a good soldier, at least until he got used to the movements by himself. The students began whispering idly at the odd gesture, and Furuichi felt like crawling away. But for the sake of the mission, and for the fact that some girls might like the military-esque vibe, he stuck with it. All right, you can take a seat next to Saji-kun over there. Glancing at the seat, Furuichi nodded his head and sat down rigidly next to the dirty blonde-haired boy. Furuichi wondered whether the boy was a delinquent, but cast it aside when he turned to him with a friendly smile. Hey there. The name's Genshiru Saji. I'm the secretary of the student council. Oh, a student council. What a nice change from the piece of SHT Ishiyama. If Furuichi thought back on it, if Ishiyama had anything resembling a student council, then it would be the current group under Oga, mainly being Kanzaki, Haimkawa, Kunieda, Taoju, and Natsume. What a shitty prospect that is, Furuichi thought to himself. Well, besides Kunieda. Nice to meet you, Furuichi replied honestly, glad that no one had started to call him names yet. Still, I heard most of the student council are made up of appealing girls. Saji's smile seemed to brighten to a certain lecherous degree. yet guarded enough to let Furuichi know he was talking about friends. Fufufu, even that was enough. Of course, for anybody to enter a school filled to the brim with girls, they had to be a massive pervert. All of the girls in the student council are stunningly appealing, especially Sona Kaichu, Saji said with such zealous zeal that Furuichi was slightly taken aback. Sona Kaichu? Wait, what was with this scene? A boy in a female-dominated student council with apparent affection to the president. It can't be. There surely must be girls that like him. Could it be? Could he already met a piece of SHT who has a HRM? The bell for lunch rang, and before Furuichi could mutter anything, a short girl and another girl with white hair and big melons appeared, grabbing onto Saji. Tears of jealousy flowed down his voice. Even here I'm trapped in a love comedy. Saji looked like he was going to defend himself, but Furuichi quickly turned away and ran like a little beach with his tail in between his legs. How can plain-looking guy already have a HRM? He yelled. Wait. Was it because the girls outnumbered the guys? Going from that logic, it was only natural right to end up having a HRM. Despite the utter foolishness of such thoughts, Furuichi gripped onto it like a lifeline. That's it. I'll start a HRM. I'll do it. Don't laugh at me. With this school full of girls, I'll make a HRM. He would have continued had he not felt a sharp pain on his spine and knew that Lamia had overheard him. For the next 30 minutes, the group of students who were passing by were given the odd view of a boy dressed like a soldier being lectured by a chibai. After the whole ordeal, Takeuchi was about to lash out at Lamia for attacking him in the middle of school when Elaine appeared and whisked him away again. Being thrown out gasping in the middle of the rain, Furuichi glared balefully up at the old man. What was that about? And why did you only grab me? I told you to stop doing this, you old man, Furuichi yelled at him. However, Elaine didn't look at him and instead stared at something behind Furuichi. That was when Takeuchi felt it, the overwhelming killing intent that saturated the air. Turning around, Takeuchi was able to spot a priest in the middle of the alleyway, squaring off with a blonde pretty boy holding a demonic sword. Elaine, Furuichi muttered. Yes, Takeuchi Dono, it seems a member of Gremory-san's peerage has engaged in combat with a troublesome opponent. That is one of the holy swords of Excalibur. This is most disturbing. Furuichi frowned and quietly pulled out his tissues. Elaine, that boy is a demon. Blonde hair, pretty boy, Kiba Yuyudo, Rias Gremory's knight. Oh, I see you paid attention. Yay, he seems roughed up. Elaine, take him to Lamia, I'll deal with the priest, Furuichi muttered. Maybe it came from the war with the fallen angels back in Ishiyama or the recurring fights since then, but Furuichi was unusually calm with the multitude of BLD lust in the air. Understood. Without a moment too soon, Elaine had quickly appeared behind Yuyudo-san. The knight cried out for a brief moment before disappearing completely within the transportation devil. Huh? What's this? I was having a good match, the priest yelled. Furuichi landed in front of him, causing the priest to turn towards him. Oh, another runt is here? You don't smell like a demon. Ha ha ha. Furuichi smirked. The tissues were already in his nose, and it seemed like the priest wasn't able to sense the thought projection behind him. Come Jabberwock, Furuichi muttered, his personality influenced by the presence inside him. Ah, do we kill him? Do I trash him to death? He seems tough, that DMN exorcist. Just make it a light thrashing, Furuichi commanded and dropped to a ready stance. Freed launched forward and Jabberwock completely took over his body, sidestepping the attack and grabbing the priest's arm. Oi, you piece of SHT Gaki. That's a nice sword you got there. Freed was tossed around like a ragdoll by Jabberwock, becoming nothing more than the demon general's plaything. However, the shitty swordsman was good and Furuichi had some bruises and cuts on his body. Due to the demonic power surging through him, they were excruciatingly painful, but like all other times Furuichi was possessed by Jabberwock. He realized he relished the feeling of being hurt. It felt good to feel the adrenaline coursing through him again. Freed staggered out of the wall, coughing and spitting BLD, and the Jabberwock-possessed Furuichi slowly walked towards him. The overconfidence filled him, and Furuichi decided that his prey wasn't worthy to see him go all out just yet. How? You're human, but I can feel demonic power flowing out of you in waves. The shitty priest screeched as he brought his sword back up. A demon contractor? Are you one of those shitty fools who sold their souls to demons? Furuichi felt his anger spike at that, and with his Jabberwock-induced instincts, he rushed forward and brought a heel down on the priest's neck. A slice of wind and Furuichi bit his lip as his right thigh was skewered with a simple holy water doused knife. "Worthless trash," he hissed and kicked Freed away. The shitty swordsman cackled, even as BLD trickled down his face, and rushed forward. Furuichi braced and met his attack with a swing of his arm, knocking the blade away with startling amount of brute force demonic energy. Jabberwock wasn't a finesse type of demon like Elim or Agile, he was raw strength all the way through. Freed bounced back in shock. "How?" he yelled. While Furuichi had a demon in him, and likewise had demonic energy inside, he wasn't a demon, and thus Excalibur's light properties couldn't make him perish with a single cut. But the sword was still abnormally sharp, and as such he was suffering with the injuries. "Reminds me of when I fought against Oga," Furuichi muttered as he stared at his torn knuckles dripping BLD. "But your attacks are pathetically weak compared to him." The white-haired lieutenant re-engaged with the priest, taking the attacks with his body as he delivered swift and punishing strikes of his own. Usually Jabberwock would expend demonic energy to envelop around Furuichi to act as a shield against enemies, but with Excalibur's shitty aspects the shield was useless. As such his body was left bare naked to the enemy, but thankfully his fists hit more times than the sword did. A powerful uppercut that sent the priests into the air caused the priest to land on the ground with barely any way to counter. He slid against the wet pavement, and while he tried to return to a standing position, Furuichi had already slammed his foot onto his back. "Excalibur rapidly," Furuichi muttered as he stared at the sword. He smirked as Jabberwock manipulated his body to kick the downed priest in the gut. "You're not fast enough for it, you shitty priest. I think I remember you, killing my men in the west, eh?" "Shitty priest freed," Furuichi muttered as he lifted the bleeding exorcist up. "Ha ha!" The exorcist pushed his head towards Furuichi, splattering BLD onto his face, and the lieutenant tossed the body in disgust. "I'm too slow," he yelled. "My Excalibur rapidly is more than fast enough." The exorcist scooped Excalibur rapidly from the ground, and the blade disappeared to a whirlwind of strikes. Furuichi tried to dodge, but the multitude of hits moving in every direction caused him to lose more and more BLD with each swing. Furuichi wasn't a demon, he was a human, and BLD loss was especially brutal to him as he wasn't as durable as a demon. Knowing this, Jabberwock pulled at Furuichi's strings and pulled him back away from the priests. "What running away? Kukuku, where is that pompous attitude?" A vein popped on the boy's forehead, and even if he was bleeding out, he wouldn't allow such a slight against his pride to sway. Furuichi reared his arm back, a demonic seal forming in front of him, and punched through it. A demonic blast much like Oga's shot forward and slammed into the shitty priest. A long, beautifully agonizing scream filled the air and made it known to Furuichi that the exorcist had taken the full brunt of his punch, and the demon-possessed boy brought his arm back around ready for another punch. But when the smoke and debris cleared, the shitty priest was gone completely. Sighing to himself, Furuichi readjusted his slightly torn and bloodied uniform. Removing the tissues would leave him a mess on the ground, so Jabberwock removed himself from inside Furuichi and kept watch around him for anything out of the ordinary. "I felt a presence that swooped by," Jabberwock stated. "Feathers," he spat. "What was it?" Furuichi asked, wheezing and panting. Without the near-constant stream of unholy demonic energy surging through him, the lieutenant was barely able to stand straight. If his tissues fell off, there was no doubt he'd hit critical condition immediately without the extra strength. "Angels, but not as bright as those in heaven. Fallen angels. Boy, head back to your home, and then release me from the summoning. I have to report this. Lucifer and Beelzebub-sama would want to know this," Jabberwock ordered. "Aye," Furuichi muttered weakly and took off running to the direction of his home. As he ran he wondered about the blonde pretty boy and hoped he was fine. He had heard the Gremorys weren't so bad, and at least he'd be able to finally meet Hiwanasan with the impressive rack. He reached his home as the rain began to let up, and the BLD that stained his uniforms had run off slightly. Furuichi paused in front of the door, the small apartment that he owns with his sister that had a living room, 3 rooms and a kitchen. Deciding that the front door was a bad idea, he used Jabberwock's demonic power and scaled the side of the building, lunging himself into his room which had the window opened. "Furuichi, Lamia cried out in alarm as she noticed his bloodied form enter the brightly lit room. Furichi flinched and quickly pulled the tissues out, bidding Jabberwock goodbye. I don't feel so good, Lamia. He collapsed onto the bed, rolling himself up to a ball as Lamia tried to make him do the opposite. Stop that, I need to see the damage, she protested. The lieutenant decided that fighting the person trying to help you was ridiculous and quickly did as she ordered. Ka, he heard Lamia click her tongue. Why was that? Was the damage that bad? Furichi, don't move, this is going to be painful, but... A loud crunch noise was heard and Furichi opened his mouth to a silent, horrified scream as he realized that Lamia was setting the bone back on his broken ulna. Widening his eyes, Furichi was allowed to see the actual damage to his body. While he had sustained extensive damage with broken bones and bruises along his body before in Ishiyama, Furichi decided that fighting against someone with a weapon was vastly different. There were arcs of BLD carved into his body, and he had suffered a broken arm and a busted rib due to some of the attacks from when Excalibur rapidly activated. Finally, Furichi resolved to not use Jabberwock again unless fighting someone without a bladed weaponry. What happened? Lamia asked worriedly. A Landelin brought a blonde kid back and asked me to patch him up. He's outside in the living room with Honoka keeping him company. Wait, Furichi muttered. Did you come into my house from the front door? Did Honoka see you? Lamia frowned. Of course she did. She opened the door. Furichi started to sweat. He had known his family had been utterly disappointed in him the moment Landelin had entered the household with his ridiculous claims, but after Lamoa entered every night to relieve him of the poisonous effects of the tissues, they had stated getting severely concerned over him. Just the thought of what Honoka must be thinking he brought her along. Did she come here willingly? Is she being forced here or blackmailed? Made Furichi fear his own family all of a sudden. Enough of that, Lamia insisted. What happened to you? Get your priorities straight. She's right. He was supposed to be the straight man. Was his removal from Oga's side reduced him into the same highly improbable idiots with crossed priorities? Landelin brought me over to fight between an exorcist and that blonde kid. I fought off the exorcist and told Landelin to transport the kid here. An exorcist? Lamia said in alarm. Who did you summon? Jabberwock. Lamia's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets in surprise. He was able to do this much damage to you with Jabberwock? Furichi couldn't help but laugh awkwardly. Rather, he didn't take the fight seriously and didn't care how fragile my body was. The young doctor seemed shocked at that, her eyes wide as she stared at Furichi. The lieutenant was afraid he had said something wrong, but before he could placate her, she had already returned to her usual Lamia face with her arms crossed over her chest. Geez, you guys are way too reckless, she complained as she bandaged his arm. I can't do much, no, but if I can get some tools over from Landelin, I can fix you up. Though I can't remove the scarring. Your frail human body is incapable of handling some of my more advanced healing remedies. Ahahaha, anything is fine as long as I'm not dead. Lamia, Furichi said. The little girl didn't say anything but tightened the bandages around his arm. Furichi only barely paid attention to the stinging hisses and pained grunts that left his mouth as she worked, remaining perfectly still for her to work. Here, I need you to eat this pill, she said, handing him a tablet. It'll ease the pain, like a regular painkiller, but speed up your natural healing with demonic power. That's pretty convenient, Furichi muttered. He swallowed the bitter-tasting tablet without fuss and pulled a new set of clothes from his wardrobe. Unfortunately, they were another set of 84th Pillars Squad uniform. Lamia, go see how the kid is doing while I change. The young demon blushed and quickly left the room as Furichi went about the task of putting on his clothes. While he did, he thought about the match with Freed. It was a beach and a half to deal with, what with the Excalibur breaking most of his defenses. Furichi considered the idea of using a sword to do battle with the priest in the future. It would be wiser to use that method, but that would rely heavily on Agiel or his luck in calling one of the swordswomen in the 84th. Thoughts for another time, Furichi said out loud. He secured the top portion of his uniform and smoothed out the collars before stepping out and seeing the Gremory knight seating on the couch with Honoka blushing by his side. Lamia was in the kitchen doing who knows what. Ah, Furichi-san, I apologize for intruding, the pretty boy said with a handsome smile. TCH, Furichi was regretting helping the BSTRD of a pretty boy out. However, Furuichi had spent long enough around delinquents to know that the kid's inner thoughts were far from what he displayed. "Hanoka-chan, can you please let me talk to my friend, Yuyudo-san, here?" Furuichi asked his sister. The youngest Furuichi sagged her shoulders, but knew that it was the polite thing to do, so she quietly excused herself and entered her room in the apartment. While that happened, Lamia quietly entered the living room, a curious expression on her face. "Knight-san," Furuichi asked, sighing as he carefully dissolved into the couch. "Why were you fighting an exorcist so late in the night?" "I wasn't," the knight admitted. "He attacked me, Lieutenant-san." Furuichi smiled a little as he stretched out on the couch. "Were you already briefed on the situation?" he asked. The knight nodded as he set the teacup down on the table, watching the starry skyline outside the living room window. "Sona Kaichu has already informed us of the situation. Basically, you're a member of an organization from the demon world that will be stationed in Cuo for a just-in-case scenario." Yuyudo-sen blinked, then turned to him. "But to think a member of the 84th would come to the human world makes you wonder if a war was coming soon." No, Furuichi quickly denied. "Even if you say that, I'm just a lieutenant. A lieutenant. Not only that, but I'm also human. I've just been mixed up in all this. A war? Don't be nuts, I'll seriously die." Yuyudo-sen seemed surprised by his reaction but smiled in a polite, gentlemanly manner. "Seriously go die," Furuichi thought. "Do not be modest. Human or not, to be a pillar is said to be a difficult task," Yuyudo-san interjected. "Listen, Kiba-san, can I call you Kiba?" At Yuyudo-san's nod, the now Kiba-san crossed his arms as he waited for Furuichi to continue. "I may be a pillar, but please, I'm still an ordinary boy. Either way, the situation you was in is dangerous, extremely dangerous. That swordsman is a serious problem, so it'd be smart of you to inform you Mstr, Gremory-san, of what has transpired." It took a while, but Kiba-san finally nodded reluctantly. "I agree, that would be for the very best." Furuichi nodded and stood up. "Now I'm sorry to be rude, but it's rather late you know, and Hanoka has school tomorrow." Kiba smiled and nodded, standing up with all the grace of an actual knight. "No, not at all. I thank you for your consideration. Oh, if you could, can you stop by the Occult Research Club? I'm sure having your point of view would help in retelling the exact encounter. Not to mention, my Mstr is interested herself in this apparently powerful member of the 84th. Powerful, eh? Furuichi didn't know what to do, so he just smiled and laughed. Kiba smiled at him and left the apartment with a final wave to them. My, what a handsome gentleman, Lamia blushed behind the counter. Nothing like the disgusting Furuichi right here. This disgusting Furuichi is right here. With Kiba gone, Hanoka decided to return to sleep while Lamia told him she would return to hell for a while. Don't do anything dangerous while I'm gone, she yelled before leaving. Furuichi waved goodbye to her, threatened Elaine from entering his room, and slept the aches and pains away. When the sun rose, he went back to Cuo Academy, arms nestled behind his back and posture perfect as dictated by the semi-alive piece of clothing. Hecadoth and Agil had already left for the demon world, telling him to stay careful of any fallen angels about, then left without another word. The walk to Cuo was uneventful, and Hanoka was rather silent as she nervously twitched by her side. His little sister was rather nervous of Cuo Academy, which was much larger and held more prestige than any other she'd been in. Wasn't a good older brother supposed to do something here? Say something manly and cool to the adoration of their little sister, something like Niai-sen, you're so cool, yay? Last he remembered, his relationship with his sister wasn't the best. In fact, alongside his family, he was sure his sister thought ill of him. Not anymore. Hanoka, he yelled, surprising the girl. No matter what happens, come straight to Niai-san and he'll help you out. There's nothing Niai-san won't do for you. Furuichi grabbed his hips, smiling slightly to himself. That was cool, wasn't it? Opening his eyes, he was shocked to realize that Hanoka was staring at him with a disgusted expression. Is that what you said to that poor girl? She muttered in apparent revulsion. Poor girl? Did she meant Lamia? What is this? Get real, do you really think your older brother is that creepy? This isn't a shonen manga where it would fly without a bat of an eyelash. Niai-sen were already here, so I'll take my leave. Wait, Furuichi stuttered as she quickly ran off to her class. He stared at her back, his face flat across his head. You got the wrong idea, he mumbled, staring at her back. Furuichi sighed pitifully to himself and would have continued moving had someone not stepped into his personal space. Furuichi-san, a voice said. Oh, it was Saji-kun again. Furuichi wondered what he wanted. Oh, student council secretary, nice to see you, Furuichi said casually in greeting. The sandy brown-haired boy nodded curtly and stuttered. What was with this weird reaction? Sona Kaichu has asked for your presence, Lieutenant-san, Saji said, sweating a little bit. Oh, it seems he was also already informed of him. But Sona Kaichu, that must be the Citri heiress. Oh, is that okay? School is going to start soon, and wouldn't the students be wondering why I'm there? Furuichi asked, rubbing the back of his head. Saji smiled tightly. It's all right, Sona Kaichu has already prepared for your arrival. Please just follow me, Saji said. Furuichi nodded his head and quietly followed Saji until they reached the student council room. Stepping in showed a number of curious developments. For one thing, the student council was indeed filled with appealing young women, and the other thing was that Sona Kaichu was also indeed a cool and mature beauty. Furuichi already felt his BLD circulate throughout his body. Keeping his poker face on, his body immediately snapped a salute instead of the bow he intended. Sona Kaichu smiled at him and rose to her feet, assuming a posture as though she was addressing a dutiful soldier. No, wait. You've got the wrong impression. It is an honor to meet the esteemed lieutenant of the 84th Pillar Squad, Sona Kaichu greeted. Eh? Furuichi chuckled awkwardly. Not this again. Really, I'm just a regular lieutenant. Sona Kaichu had a face of stern calculation, but her face seemed to show that she expected much of him. Please, he wasn't being humble. Your cohorts Hekadoth-san and Agiel-san spoke highly of you, and to have the favor of two high-ranking pillars is no easy feat, Sona Kaichu said. Diamenu Hekadoth. However, there is a reason why I called you here. While the Pillar Squad is welcome here, I must be aware of the situation. Hekadoth-san explained the situation as best he could, about the fallen angels and the old Mao faction, but the situation has entered a delicate phase. Delicate? Furuichi asked, understanding the severity of the situation. There are currently 2 exorcists who gave requested to speak with Rias Gremory, who is in charge of this territory, about a current situation only I can begin to imagine, Sona Kaichu said. Furuichi didn't really get what the big deal was, but he could infer from his battle with the exorcist the other day that this wasn't normal. Do you not think it strange? How 2 devout believers of their Lord and Savior has taken to coming to us, the demons, to talk? For something like that, for them it is heresy of the highest order. Yet 2 exorcists have came to me and asked. Furuichi thought about it. While he wasn't the brightest knife in the drawer, Furuichi was DMN well smarter than the delinquents in Ishiyama, and after years of watching his own hide, he was able to understand a dangerous situation. There's something happening that is warranting the action. Can't be a simple mission. If so, then why go through the trouble? Maybe to ask for cooperation, or perhaps non-interference. Both of them would be troubling. Sona Kaichu nodded, small smile on her face. I see why Hekadoth-san likes to call you tactician. Hee, I'm not that smart, Furuichi said abashedly. It was difficult to keep himself together to be praised so calmly by the spectacled beauty. But regardless, it comes down to the situation. If it's for cooperation, then the mission must be extremely dangerous for them ask for demon assistance, and if it is for non-interference, then there is a chance the mission could spill over into our territory. Sona Kaichu nodded in agreement. Yes, in the end of the day, the safety of Cuo Academy and its students is my priority, so I felt to inform you of the situation, Lieutenant-san, since it is your duty as well, Sona Kaichu said, and to see you with my own eyes as well. Well, I'm not much to look at, Furuichi mumbled, though he felt satisfied that Saji was glaring at him with jealousy. Hey, it's supposed to be the other way around. Be happy with your own HRM. Also, I would like for you to include yourself into the meeting between Rias and the 2 exorcists. Not to undermine Rias' authority, however, as a member of the 84th Pillar Squad, you will be standing there with the authority of Beelzebub-sama, and thus she cannot object. Furthermore, I can rest easy knowing you could keep Rias from allowing her peerage to do anything too drastic. I fear her kindly nature is far too loose sometimes. Furuichi didn't understand but nodded his head. This time the uniform didn't object to him bowing, and he did so. At your leave, Citri-sama, He was getting used to the vibes the uniform was giving him, almost too quickly. "Please, Sona Kaichu is fine while in school," Sona Kaichu interjected. Furuichi nodded. Of course, he agreed and excused himself from the room. As he walked out, he wondered what was about to happen after school. "I'll have Hanoka return home immediately." School was over, and Furuichi adjusted the collar of his shirt as he made his way towards the occult research club. A part of him was a little bit miffed that he had been unable to enjoy himself fully inside the delinquent-free, female-dominated school, but his uniform was getting himself enough attention. Furuichi was glad about his fake background in Macau. It brought a lot of curious people, most of them girls, to ask him what the foreign country was like. "Ah, Miyamura-san has sexy legs," Furuichi mumbled happily. Yes, he could definitely get used to this school, which was filled with many delicate and appealing women as opposed to the apes back in Ishiyama. But Furuichi had to be careful. He had heard about the perverted trio and would rather distance himself as much as he could from them. But enough of that. He had a situation to think about, one which he had been cornered into by the 84th Pillar's squad. The exorcists had just entered the school grounds as far as Furuichi was concerned, and since the lieutenant had been delayed by the class rep assigning him after-school duties, he was running a little bit late. Furuichi had already called ahead and told Gremory-san to start without him, as the occult research club was a ways away from the classroom building. As Furuichi walked, he carefully and discreetly shoved 2 tissue papers into his nostrils. Usually, the tissues would summon a random member of the 84th Pillar's squad, but Furuichi had since learned how to dominate the random selection process with preferences. Usually, he'd have a preference for each given situation on hand, and can increase the chances of that specific devil being summoned. Of course, all it did was increase the chances. There was still the possibility of a random member being called. "Hekadoth," Furuichi greeted as he felt Hekadoth appear next to him. "I heard Jabberwock lend you his strength the other day," Hekadoth commented idly as he rode behind Furuichi. Of course, he wasn't there physically, so he weighed absolutely nothing. "Yay. An exorcist," he called him shitty priest Freed. "Do you know anything about that?" he asked as he kept walking, folding the tissues a little bit into his nose to conceal them. Hekadoth smirked at the name. "What, no capitals?" he said in jest before getting serious. "Yay, I do actually. He's a troublesome guy who has been a thorn in our side. I'm curious though, we usually see him in France and some parts of England, mostly around Nottingham. Wonder why he's here?" "I don't know, but we might find out." 2 exorcists from the church have arrived requesting an audience with Rias Gremory to talk, Furuichi said, watching Hekadoth expectantly. The devil made a shocked face, which Furuichi expected, and stared at the ceiling for a moment. "The wacko Christians are coming to us to negotiate. Never thought I'd see the day," Hekadoth muttered. Furuichi sweat dropped. "Are you sure you guys are any better? You came to Earth beating and clubbing everything in your way," he countered. Hekadoth ignored him and crossed his arms, continuing his own tirade. "I'm sure you're slightly confused with the situation," the Pillar General stated, still clinging onto Furuichi's back with a serious expression. The white-haired demon contractor paused for a moment, thinking that statement through. He was confused because even with logic, it was difficult to keep up with all these new information that he didn't understand. "Of course I am. I didn't even know exorcists exist till now. Rather, isn't Cuneta an exorcist? And what's with this Excalibur? Or these priests? Fallen angels? Are you saying angels actually exist?" Furuichi seethed, glad that no one was nearby and could hear him. "I'll explain it all to you the best way I can. Right now, the situation between the 3 factions, that is, the angels, the fallen angels, and the devils, are at a tipping point." Furuichi fell silent, listening intently as he kept dodging anyone still lingering around school. Right now, the fallen angels are stirring some things up, and there is a chance that the old Mao faction will do something as well. Right now, not many people know this, which is why the situation is so unclear. What we do know, however, is that recent activity has dictated a shift in favor. I don't know what's going on in the angel side, but the fallen angels have gotten troublesome members into their factions, especially a single man who in any case will be a troublesome factor, especially with the Red Dragon Emperor as a member of the devil's side. Furuichi frowned. "Red Dragon Emperor?" he asked. Hekadoth shook his head in the negative as he hardened his eyes. You'll see him eventually. Dragons are existences which still gather much attention in the world after all. Even our castle once belonged to the great dragon king Bahamut. In any case, as you can understand, the current predicament for the 84th is at an all-time high. The majority of the 84th is spread across the vast expanse of the demon territory, keeping an eye out on the recent events and ensuring the stability. I thought the 84th were loyal to N? Furuichi asked. Hekadoff nodded. However, we still obey the orders of Beelzebub-sama and that of the 4 governing Maoists. Militaristically, the 84th is under the command of Asmodeus-sama, who is in charge of all military assets in Underworld. The 84th usually deals with internal affairs. However, there are times when we are called to the human world to secure territory on Earth and escorting young high-class devils. But that's beside the point. Hekadoff made an irritated grunt at his own monologue. The point is that, for 2 exorcists to willingly come to us, it shows just how desperate the situation has become. Michael, the Archangel, has always been the most righteous, even if he does really wish peace now that the war ended. The Christian belief was never so flexible, and with Jabberwock mentioning one of the Excaliburs in possession of a rogue priest, it just goes to show. Listen here, tactician, the Excalibur is a dangerous sword, able to make even high-class devils perish with a single blow. Whatever they came here for, if it is connected to that sword, then be wary at all times. I'm not sure I can understand it completely, Furuichi muttered, but basically this event that I'm on could represent the beginning of something big. Hekadoff nodded in agreement. It's best to wait and let it develop. Right now the 84th is tied up with current matters, hence why you're here. I have to go now. While it was breaking bread with you, I could only spare a few moments. Why? Hekadoff frowned, mulling something over, and shook his head. We've received disturbing news from an old devil in the Magic Association. Really, this situation, it is becoming more and more troublesome. Not to mention we share our borders with that. Furuichi pondered on what that meant but dutifully removed the tissues after bidding Hekadoff away. He had arrived early to the meeting, which was fine for him as he addressed the thoughts in his mind. He understood that Excalibur in the possession of that insane rogue exorcist would spell doom to both the angels and the devils. Furthermore, Hekadoff had mentioned Excaliburs, which meant that if anything, the meeting would be about the priest and his own Excalibur. However, would the priest really be that much trouble to warrant sending 2 exorcists? Or even meeting devils, who they apparently fervently hate? No, hate wasn't so easy to let go for cooperation. Furuichi knew this. There were things he didn't know. The club room door opened, and Furuichi noticed the Occult Research Club enter with Uwaya 2 appealing foreign beauties. Before anyone could notice, Furuichi saved their images in his mind, even if their bodies were covered by the cloaks. Then he noticed that Yuyuto Kid standing in the back, his hands tucked behind his back and a sour expression on his face. He was glaring at the exorcists with a look that Furuichi had seen plenty of times shot at Oga's back. Whatever was troubling him ran deep. Gremory-sama, Furuichi greeted respectfully as his body reacted automatically with a salute. The red-headed Gremory girl, whom Furuichi couldn't help but glance a peek at her bust, seemed surprised to see him there before a calm and cool expression took over. Lieutenant San, she greeted, I had forgotten you would attend the meeting with us. Then she glanced at the 2 exorcists. Excuse me, this is Lieutenant Furuichi of the 84th Pillar Squad. He will be standing there as a representative of Beelzebub-sama. Furuichi carefully watched their expressions and noted the slow widening on the darker-haired one's eyes. The Pillar Squad, she said after a moment as she took a seat. Are you expecting a war? Even if we are exorcists from the church, even we recognize the Devil Army uniform anywhere. Furuichi felt rather out of place to answer, but before he could, the Gremory girl interjected. While the 84th Pillar Squad is, in layman terms, an organized army, their main duties is the protection of Underworld's borders from outliner threats. The exorcist seemed to scoff. It is still known, widely I might add, that the 84th has a large number of highly powered devils among their ranks. Furuichi frowned and couldn't help but ask, Excuse me, Exorcist-san, however you seem to know a lot about the 84th. It's Zenobia, and of course, given that your members use the names of angels, it is practically insulting to us, who follow our Christian beliefs, Zenobia stated with the girl next to her nodding vigorously. Furuichi frowned, but didn't really know much to counter her. Pillar generals are among the strongest of the pillar's lowest echelon, ranging from low to mid-class devils on their own, while pillar barons themselves max out at high class with their general in command standing at ultimate class, the Gremory girl said, and she seemed to toss a glance at Furuichi. SHT, did she think him to be a spineless coward? Either way, if you are with me, the pillar squad, then the air has shifted dramatically, Zenobia stated. Irina? She asked of the girl next to her. It was easy to follow the conversatio. Well, easy if he just took a minute to connect the dots and ponder on the situation. 3 Excaliburs had been stolen from the church, and all their exorcists have since not returned then. The leading suspect was one of the leaders of the Gregory, Kakabeel the fallen angel. Frowning, Furuichi listened on. Our request? No. Our order is to not to have any devils intrude in the battle between us and the fallen angels for the Excaliburs. In other words, we came here to tell you not to interfere with this incident. The Gremory girl pursed her lips, asked the very obvious question. Such manner of speech, do you think we would ally ourselves with the fallen angels? The headquarters has decreed that it has a high probability, Zenobia stated. That is absurd, Furuichi interjected, even though he had thought he was being quiet about it. All eyes turned on him, and he resisted the act of scratching his neck. Maybe it was the uniform talking, but Furuichi was able to keep his posture straight as he spoke. I'm assuming you would think that the situation would be a win-win for both sides? When instead, allying ourselves with the fallen angels and giving them the Excaliburs would create a shift. The current situation that we are in now, in a way, is a tipping point, Furuichi said, borrowing Hecadoth's words, and giving swords which can cause damage to devils to the fallen angels would place the devils in the corner, rather than those on your side. If anything, the situation is just as troublesome for the devils as it is for you. Zenobia mulled his words over, watching Furuichi critically, before grunting, You have a sound mind, and bring up valid points. The higher mustn't have thought about it when they sent us here. That reasoning is enough to sate our current objective needs. Furuichi frowned. So the meeting was for non-interference? Rather, it was to ensure that the devils won't play sides. Still, you cannot expect us to sit idly by. While this is an internal matter to the church itself, the immediate moment either of you stepped into the Gremory's territory, the situation has become a devil problem as well. The fighting will damage us directly, and as such, could be cause enough to declare war. You are quite knowledgeable about this, Lieutenant San, Irina stated, eyeing him in quiet amazement. Furuichi resisted the urge to blush and tried to look cool in his statue-like at ease position. The 84th Pillar Squad mostly handles internal affairs after all, Gremory-san stated. In fact, for the past year they've been active around Japan for reasons only I can imagine. As such, it is to be noted that their members have a good grasp on the political situation in the underworld. Furuichi sweat dropped. Rather, they spent that year trying to kill Oga so as to ensure N would be the only contender for the title of Beelzebub. For them to be active for a year without us knowing, Zenobia muttered. I expect you yourself are a veteran member. No, rather I'm a human which has contracted with the Pillar Squad, Furuichi said honestly. A look of shock appeared on the exorcist and some of the Gremory group's face. A human? And you're a member of a demon army? You must have contracted with someone immensely powerful, Irina muttered in shock. Can I ask who you contracted with? Furuichi just shrugged. All of them. Silence dominated the room as everyone stared at Furuichi in shock. Everyone besides a blonde-haired girl and a brown-haired boy who looked rather confused. What's the matter? Did I say something strange? Furuichi said. With all of them, you say? Zenobia stuttered. And a human? You must be exceptionally strong. Furuichi was about to correct her, but Irina interrupted him. How long ago were you inducted? Furuichi frowned and crossed his arms. A year ago. It was a year ago when I started summoning members of the Pillars to lend me their strength. But after we fought against Satan, I was formally inducted into the group. You fought against Satan? Both Zenobia and Irina stared at him with wide-eyed shock. Such a powerful human, Zenobia muttered. Furuichi felt himself start to sweat. No, really, you were terribly mistaken. We must leave. I don't think this meeting has a purpose anymore, Zenobia stated as she stood up. Furuichi watched them, wondering about their reaction. Was his current situation really that unbelievable? He had thought it was plausible, and that it wasn't really all that surprising. Apparently it was. But then Furuichi remembered about the situation with Freed the priest and turned to inform them about the rogue exorcist, when the room was suddenly engulfed in demonic swords. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author WDO 345 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.